All right, so I kind of want to let you guys know a couple of things. First, so this is my last night of teaching for this month, because next week we have the family worship night, and then next week we have Nate Kurtz. You can't get a clap, Nate Kurtz. Nate Kurtz teaching. So I want you guys to know, next time I teach, we're going to be wrapping up our series in Joseph. So that first week in December is going to be our last night covering the life of Joseph. And tonight, what I want to do, I kind of want to have a little talk, and I want to hear from you guys right now. I have two questions, and the first question I want to put out to you guys, I really want to hear your thoughts, is this. In what ways does our culture, in what ways does our world today have negative views of Christianity? And in which ways is our faith viewed negative? Bryce? Okay, it takes away too much time. Anyone else? Grace? Okay, that we're hypocrites. Ben? Okay, that we're judgmental. So it's a waste of time. We're hypocrites. We're judgmental. Anyone else? Okay, Jabin? Okay, that we're being stupid, that it's just blind faith. Liberty? That we view the Bible simply as a rule book, and I think you guys are totally hitting it. So these are the negative views that people today have of our faith. So let's think about this. In which ways would our world today view Christianity in positive? Like, what ways is our faith viewed positively by those who aren't Christians? Julia? Okay, that we're kind. Eli?
That we have this type of youth group and we get together and stuff.
Okay, that we're kind, that we have community, that there's atheists that go to church. And actually what I mean by that, there's atheists that actually form their own church. Like on Sunday morning, these atheists get together and they have a church service. Well, no, that's the weird thing. They don't believe in God, but they see the value in community, that even though they don't want to serve the God we have, they want to have the community that we have. So that's right. So we're kind, that we have the sense of community. Anyone else?
We follow a good man.
Okay, we follow a good man. So think about this. There was this guy named Gandhi one time, and Gandhi, he wasn't a Christian, and this one person was trying to witness to Gandhi, and Gandhi said this: "Your Jesus I love, his followers not so much." That there's people who wouldn't become Christians, but they look at the life of Jesus, and they still say there's something special about that guy. That if you look at different religions, even different religions notice that there's something special about Jesus. As much as Islam wouldn't want to become Christian, they wouldn't recognize Jesus as God, they would say Jesus was a very good man. So there's people who aren't Christians who recognize the goodness of Jesus. Which brings me to this point. So the first 300 years of Christianity, Christians were being persecuted, and at one point in the 4th century, you have this guy that's an emperor, and he's Caesar. He's the emperor of the Roman Empire, and his name was Julian, and this is what Julian said about Christians during his lifetime. Slide. "Through the loving service rendered to strangers, through their care for the burial of the dead, it is a scandal that there is not a single Jew who is a beggar, that the godless Galileans," and that's what he called Christians, these godless Galileans, "care not only for their own poor, but for ours as well, while those who belong to us look in vain for the help that we should render to them." That you have this guy, he's not a Christian, he hates Christians, but he says this: those Christians care for other people. Like, when you look at Christianity in its purest form, people should say this about us, that Christians care. That to be a Christian, it's a person that has a caring heart. That when Christianity first started, we weren't known so much for what we said, but what we did. And now in our world today, people say we're hypocrites, like Grace pointed out, because we say good things, but the world, they don't see our actions And what Jesus would want us to get back to is this: becoming people that care. So let's go to the next slide. So this all brings us to Joseph. And tonight we're not going to so much look at Joseph, but we're going to go back and look at his family. And remember, Joseph's family is completely dysfunctional, that it's a crazy family. And we're going to look at his brothers tonight. So what's happening here is this: that last time we talked about Egypt, that there was this famine, and this famine went over the entire world, and it affected Joseph's family. So what happened? His father said, there's food in Egypt. Go down to Egypt and get food so that we don't die. So his brothers go all the way to Egypt, and Joseph recognizes his brothers, and he takes one brother and named Simeon, and we'll talk about Simeon a little bit later. He takes Simeon and he throws him in jail, and he said, if you want to see Simeon again, go back home and bring Benjamin. Why? Because Benjamin was Joseph's little brother, and that's the one brother they left behind. He said, if you want to see Simeon released, make sure to bring Benjamin with you. So they go back home and they tell their father what happens, which brings us to this. Then Reuben said to his father, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. So this whole idea, when they told Joseph's father Jacob that we have to take Benjamin down to Egypt with us, Jacob was totally against that idea. And then Reuben, the firstborn, the oldest brother, he said, if I do not bring him back to me, bring him into my care. But Jacob said, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow. And I love verse 37, because he says this: if I do not bring Benjamin back, you may put both of my sons to death if I don't bring him back to you. Okay, that doesn't seem really reassuring to Jacob. All right, so right here, Jacob said, no, Benjamin will not go with you. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so sometime later, they're running out of food, and this is what happens. Then Judah said to Israel, his father, send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. So you have Judah, who's speaking to his father Jacob, who sometimes has the name Israel. And this is Jacob's response, verse 14. He says, and may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. Basically, he says, if I lose my sons, I lose my sons. But I want you to grab this. When Reuben asked Jacob to let me take Benjamin down to Egypt, he said no to him. But when Judah asked Jacob to take Benjamin down to Egypt, he said, I'll trust you with my son. So tonight's whole lesson is this. We're going to focus on the life of Judah, and why did Jacob trust Judah over his other brothers. So first, let's look at Judah's life. When do we first really see Judah in Joseph's story? Next slide. So what's happening here, this is going all the way back to Genesis 37, and what's happening here, before I read this verse, Joseph came to tattletale on his brothers again. So what did his brothers do? They threw him in this pit, and they're eating lunch, and while Joseph is in this pit, this is what Judah said. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood, and his brothers agreed. So Judah, he's a great brother. We're not going to kill you. Let's just sell him to slavery. Brother of the year, right? You would want Judah as your big brother. So what's happening here, you have Judah, and he says, let's sell Joseph to slavery. So when it came to selling Joseph to slavery, it was Judah's idea. That was Judah's plan, and all the other brothers, they went along with it. And if you read later on in Joseph's story, it says that Joseph was crying and he was begging, and he says, please don't do this. And none of his brothers cared. And whose idea was that? It was Judah's idea to sell him to slavery, that Judah didn't have a compassionate heart, that Judah didn't care. And maybe right now you're thinking this, so what? Like this has nothing to do with my life. Like, when are you going to talk about the problems I'm dealing with? And can I tell you, if that's your thinking right now, that's exactly the problem. That every lesson isn't meant to address your specific problems in life. That sometimes what God would want us to do is not so much worry about ourselves, but really care about others. That God is really interested in not fixing every single problem in your life, but he's really interested in making your heart grow to care for others. And we see right here that Judah had a complete lack of caring about Joseph. And I wonder how many of us would find ourselves in similar situations in which we don't care. And I got two stories from my life I want to share with you. And one story I am completely embarrassed by. And it happened when I was a sophomore in college. And we had winter break. And I went with my one friend and we went to Chicago. And I remember it was just really, it was like a January night, and it was just really cold, and it was just snowing, and we were just walking like on the sidewalk. It was just like all these people. We were just walking in this crowd, trying to get back to our hotel, and this one homeless guy, he was walking in our direction, and you could just tell he was homeless. Like, his clothes, they were all beat up, and you could tell he probably had been inside for a while, because he had you know how it's really cold, and sometimes you just see icicles and things like that. Well, he had ice all in his beard, and he had that far away look in his eyes. You know, that look in your eyes where you just know that someone's had a rough time. And he was walking in our direction, and then he walked right by us, and I didn't do anything for him. There's all these people in the crowd, but he completely sticks out to me. And I felt this prompting in my heart that, maybe it was the Holy Spirit, maybe it was God. He was like, hey, Daryl, you should offer that guy to buy him some coffee. Why don't you, buy him a meal? And I completely tuned that out. And I walked right by him. And I'm completely embarrassed by that. Well, that guy died that night because no one cared. What about you? What happens in your world? Some of you go to school and you walk by people all day, and the problem is this, that we don't care. That there's this one guy who, one time they did this news story, and they asked this one guy who was this Christian thinker, they asked him to tell us what's wrong with the world. And these guys were writing all these long paragraphs and essays, and he wrote one sentence: what's wrong with the world is me. And what he meant by that, I don't care enough. Let me tell you a second story from my life. I went to England last summer, and I remember being in London, and it was great. And there was this blue sky and clouds. I was in this park in London, and it was great. And then I saw this lady in this park, and she's leaning against this gate, and she's just holding her side. And everyone's just walking by her. And once again, I felt that prompting in my heart that, Daryl, you should go do something. And I walked up to her. And she said, I can't afford to go to the hospital. I'm having a hard time, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I remember I had some food, and I offered her my lunch. And first she was like weird. She's like, no, don't. I can't take that. And the reason why, because the last time someone offered her food, that it cost her a price. And that's what's wrong. That sometimes people don't know generosity because they get taken advantage of. And I said, look, there's nothing you have to do, right? Here, just take my lunch. And I gave it to her, and she just had this look on her face of just pure gratitude, just pure thankfulness that someone took time out of their day just to be kind. And I thought, man, that makes my trip so worth it. That being in London and being able to help someone made a huge difference just in my own life. For you, if you were to help out more people, right, you would have so much bigger joy in your heart than just walking by and not caring. But this brings us back to Judah, right? Like, how did Judah become a caring person? Well, any of you guys remember the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife? Anyone remember that story? And how, Potiphar's wife said, hey, come sleep with me. And Joseph said, no. Well, the reason why that story's there, because there's a story before that, and it involves Judah. And once again, this story that involved Judah was this. Judah had 3 sons, and 2 of them died. And this is how they died. They were married to this woman named Tamar. So Judah's first son marries this woman named Tamar, and his son dies. So in that culture, because she didn't have a son, like the other son would marry her and give her a son so that she would have something to live off of. So Judah's second son marries Tamar, and then he dies. And Judah thinks there's something wrong with this woman, and he doesn't want her to marry his 3rd son. So he does everything in his power to keep his 3rd son away from her. But Tamar says, I have no children. If I don't have children, how am I going to provide for myself? So over a period of time, this is what happens. And I'm telling you this story not to be gross or anything, but the Bible's a very graphic book. So what happens? Judah, he doesn't care about purity. So remember, Joseph, he's this guy that cares about purity. Judah, he doesn't care. So what happens, Tamar, she tricks Judah into sleeping with her, and then she gets pregnant, and Judah wants to put her to death until he realizes he's the guy that got her pregnant, and then she has a son, and then there's this huge moral failure in Judah's life, which brings us all the way back to this. Go back to some previous slides for me. Yeah, go that one right there. So what happens here? That's years later from when his sons died. Judah said to Israel, send the boy along with me. Why did Jacob trust Judah? It's because Judah knew the value of life. Judah had 2 sons that died. If anyone could understand Jacob's pain, it was Judah. Because remember, Reuben said this, if I don't bring back Benjamin, you can kill my sons. And that showed that Reuben didn't understand the value of life. Judah understood his father's pain, and he developed a heart of caring, and that made Jacob trust Judah over his brothers, which brings me to this. This is my point. If I have one, it'd be this. God allows difficult things in your life to make you a more caring person. Remember this, when we first saw Judah, he didn't care what happened to his brother. He didn't care about selling Joseph into slavery, but now he understands the value of life. How did he get there? By going through tremendous heartache. God will allow bad things to happen in your life to make you a more caring person. And we have 2 choices with that. It's this. The first choice is this. When God allows bad things to happen to your life, you can become a bitter person and become angry, Or you can do the second choice, becoming a more compassionate person, which, let's go to the next slide. All right, so what I want to show you what happens here, let's fast forward to the story. So you have Judah, and he's with his brothers, and they go back with Benjamin, and they have Joseph. And what happens now through this weird circumstance of events, Joseph's going to try to take Benjamin and make Benjamin stay in Egypt and not send him back with his brothers. And after hearing that, this is what Judah says. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, if I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in the place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? How can I go back to my father if Benjamin is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that will come on my father. You see Judah's transformation right there? That Judah said this, hey, I will stay in slavery. Don't put my youngest brother in slavery. That I care about him and I care about my father. That he is saying, I will become your slave. Don't put Benjamin into slavery. And this is this complete transformation of this guy, that at one point Judah didn't care about selling his brother to slavery, and years later you have Judah and he's caring about his brother and father to the point that he's willing to go into slavery for his younger brother. And all this happens because he grew a heart of compassion. He grew a caring heart. That a caring heart will make you a more sacrificial person. And I want to show you a picture. This guy is named William Borden. And why is William Borden really important? It's because of this. Next slide. Young millionaire renounces world to be missionary. That the reason why William Borden is really important, because he was a millionaire and he was rich, and he said, I'm going to give up my family's business. Why? Because I want to go be a missionary. And William Borden lived his life by 3 quotes. Next slide. No reserves, no retreats, no regrets. And I want to tell you how William Borden got a heart for missions. This is what happened. Okay, how many of you are going to graduate high school this year? Show of hands. Okay, so let me tell you this. William Borden, he graduated at 16, and when he graduated high school, his parents gave him a ticket to go sail around the world. Okay, that's a pretty awesome graduation present. They say, hey, you graduated high school, you're going to go see the entire world. And while he was sailing around the world, he saw the condition of the world, and he said, people need Jesus. And he said, I'm going to be a missionary. And when he came home and he told his friend, I'm going to be a missionary, his friend stared at him and said, that's dumb, right? And then after his friend told him that, he took his Bible, and in the back of his Bible, he wrote, no reserves. And what he meant by that was this: I am not going to allow anyone to talk me out of being a missionary because I care for people. And then he went to college and he went to Yale. And when he graduated from Yale, he had all these job offers, and he turned down every job offer that was offered to him. And in the back of his Bible, he wrote, no retreats. So then after he graduates college, he's 25, and his ultimate goal is this: he wants to go to China and share the gospel in China with the Muslims. But before that, he goes to Egypt because he wants to learn Arabic. And in Egypt, he got this disease. And while he was on the boat trying to make it to China, he was going to die because of that disease. And before he died, he took his Bible and he wrote on the back, no regrets. And that whole idea of writing those 3 phrases was this: that he saw the need that people need Jesus, and that compassion moved him. And even though he never made it to China, his life wasn't wasted. And this is why. When people found out that he died at 25, willing to give up millions of dollars to just simply share the gospel with people, that hundreds of people and thousands of people on college campuses heard his story, and they all decided to go become missionaries. Why? Because William Borden's heart, his heart made him become a sacrificing person, a sacrificial person, and that motivated other people to care. And let's bring this all to Jesus right now, that we're told this, that Jesus cares for us, that Jesus has compassion for us. So let's go to the next slide. Because I think what happens is this sometimes. When bad things happen to us, we think this, that God doesn't care for me as much as he should. Well, I want to show you something. When Jesus got baptized, it says this, and a voice from heaven said, "This is my son, in whom I love, with whom I am well pleased." That when Jesus got baptized, God the Father said, "This is my son, who I love." Why is that really important? Because the very next verse, the very next chapter, we read this. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. How does that make sense? On one hand, we're told this, that God the Father loves Jesus. And then we're following up with this, that then God led Jesus into the desert to be tempted by Satan. The reason why that happened, because as soon as Jesus is done with this temptation with Satan, we're told this, that Jesus then began his public ministry. That even though Jesus is fully God, he was also fully a person. And even though he was fully God, Jesus had to grow as a person. He had to grow in compassion. He had to grow in caring people. So before God the Father allowed Jesus to do his public ministry, he allowed Jesus to go through difficult times so that he would have a compassionate heart to reach others. If God is going to grow our hearts, one way God is going to do that is allow difficult times to come into our lives. Why? So that we become caring people. And by becoming caring people, we have a real impact in the life of others. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to pray, ask the band to come back up. Dear Jesus, I want to say thank you for the life of Judah, and thank you for what we learned from him, how you took someone that didn't care about people and you allowed difficult circumstances to come into his life to make him a more caring person, to have a heart that would genuinely care about others. And right now I pray for all of us in this room that we would recognize that you allow difficulties to come into our lives so that we become caring individuals, that we can become caring people. That I realize that, I just pray that with the two choices we have, that we wouldn't allow our hearts to grow into bitterness, but that we would allow our hearts to grow in compassion, that we would realize that all the difficult things that come into our lives, they come by your caring hand to grow our hearts to care for others. We give this prayer in your name. Amen.